How's it going, everyone? I'm Adam Molina. So the Anker Soundcore Flare might be the speaker to get this summer. Why do I think that? Well, stick around to find out. This is our full review. Cue the B-roll. So I reviewed the original Soundcore speaker a while back and even the more durable version that came a little later. And while they both sounded good and I liked the way they felt, they were pretty durable, they weren't exactly the prettiest speaker. And now that finally changes with the Soundcore Flare, which looks as good as it sounds. So I'm not entirely sure who designed this speaker, but I definitely get some Swedish vibes from it. The minimal gray aesthetic and colorful LED halo around the bottom wouldn't look out of place on a shelf in IKEA. Thankfully though, you won't have to spend your Saturday putting this together. The build feels good, and though the fabric isn't as grippy as what you might find on something like the JBL Flip 4 or the UE Wonderboom, it still feels good in the hand and it's easy enough to hold. To me, the Soundcore Flare is kind of like what you would get if you combined the JBL Flip 4 and the JBL Pulse and then stripped them down to the bare essentials. Now of course nothing is perfect and there are a few quirks, but none of them are deal breakers. For one, the controls up top are more or less flush with the speaker. And it doesn't help that they're also the same color as the plastic, so trying to adjust the volume in the dark just isn't as easy as it would be if the buttons were raised just a little bit more. So another issue that I had was the rubber flap on the back that protects the inputs. It could be just that I have baby fingers or maybe a sign from a higher power that I should stop biting my nails, but I had a really hard time pulling open the flap. And I mean, a really hard time. It does kind of look like I could just like push it back in, if I could. Success. Yeah, as I was saying, rubber flap, kind of a bit. I'm sure this isn't a problem for anyone with nails that are even a little bit longer than mine, but I still wish that there was a more accessible way to pull that tab open. On a positive note, at least you know that you won't have to worry about water or sand getting in there and ruining the speaker, because this rubber flap completes the IPX7 build. I guess it's a fair trade so you can submerge it in water for up to 30 minutes, if you're into that sort of thing. So the Soundcore Flare is rocking Bluetooth 4.2, and although it doesn't have any easy connection features like NFC, it isn't that hard to connect to it. All you gotta do is press the Bluetooth button on the back and then find it in settings like you would with any other Bluetooth device. Connection strength was also pretty strong if you were within the range of about 30 feet, which is pretty standard for Bluetooth. Up top you'll find the playback controls including volume up, volume down, and a multi-function button in the middle that lets you pause or play music, as well as skip between tracks if you double or triple tap it. You'll also get a bass up button and a toggle for changing the color of the LED halo without the app. Oh yeah, and then there's the app. From what I've seen and read online, it's a pretty useful app. It lets you change the colors of the LED lights, lets you pair up a second speaker so you can have stereo sound, and even gives you some basic EQ functionality. Unfortunately, I was unable to get this app to work. I downloaded it from the App Store and then went through the process of trying to update the firmware, and it just completely froze while installing the firmware. And I deleted the app and reinstalled it, and it was the same thing. I just couldn't get the app to work. So that could use a little work. So Anker claims a battery life of about 12 hours of constant playback, but we got closer to 5.5 hours of constant playback. But it's worth mentioning that we did have volume set to 100%, and we had the LED lights turned on. You can probably save juice if you turn the LED lights off, and you can definitely make it last a lot longer if you're not maxing out the volume. So it charges via micro USB instead of USB Type-C, which is kind of a bummer, but it does play music while it's charging, even though it will obviously charge a little slower. While Anker products usually won't go toe-to-toe with some of the bigger, more premium speakers, they're consistently good for the price, and the Anker Soundcore Flare is no different. It's not great, but it's pretty impressive. My only issue with this is the highs. On max volume, there's a hefty amount of distortion and instruments can be piercing at times. To be fair, this isn't an issue on regular volume, but it's still worth mentioning because if you're outdoors, chances are you're gonna want this speaker to be pretty loud. But the sound quality critiques stop there. Vocals in the mids have a good emphasis on them and stand out from the background without overlaying on top of them. A good example of this is the song The Mother We Share by Churches, where Lauren's vocals cut through the synth-heavy track loud and clear. Despite its small size, the speaker also did a surprisingly good job with the lower notes as well. The bass line throughout the song Motivate by J. Cole has a nice rhythm to it, and it continues throughout the song even when the bass kicks come in. Those bass kicks also don't cut into the bottom of the vocals at any point. though that isn't the case if you hit that extra bass button or the bass up button. It doesn't completely ruin the sound, but I think the Soundcore Flare gives the low end the perfect amount of emphasis by default. Turning on that bass up button is just overkill in my opinion, but I suppose some bass heads would love it. So should you get the Soundcore Flare? If you can't tell by the title, I'm gonna say yes. This is pretty much a steal in my book. If you're looking for a speaker to take with you to the beach or to the park this summer, the Anker Soundcore Flare is small enough to easily fit in a backpack, and it's IPX7 certified, so you don't have to worry about rain or dropping it in a pool or anything like that. If you're a student, it's inexpensive, and obviously who doesn't want colorful lights? And if you're just someone that can't have nice things because you always lose or break them, a $60 speaker is probably good for you because you won't be too bummed out if you lose or break it. Also in the sub $100 price range are speakers like the JBL Flip 4 and the UE Wonderboom. And the Soundcore Flare holds its own against both of those. The only one that I think has the slight edge on it is probably the UE Wonderboom because it floats. So if you're on a boat and you accidentally knock it into the ocean, it won't go sinking down to Davy Jones' locker. But besides that, the Soundcore Flare is a pretty great value. And that pretty much wraps it up for this one. If you want to know more about this speaker or any of the other products we review, make sure to check out SoundGuys.com. But while you're here, hit that subscribe button down there and also the notification bell so you'll be the first to know every time we upload a video. Also, make sure to follow us on social media. We have Instagram and Twitter at @RealSoundGuys. It's probably somewhere down there in the card. I'm Adam Molina. Happy listening.